Our speaker today has founded, scaled, and sold 3 international software companies, then went to get trained in psychology and neuroscience. When he's not sneaking in time on his PlayStation 5 or counting down the minutes to the next season of The Last of Us, I think some of us here do the same thing. He's writing for entrepreneur.com, authoring best-selling books, and mentoring leaders at organizations like Microsoft, PwC, and Salesforce. To share the latest tools with us on leadership mindset, please join me in welcoming author, speaker, and psychologist R. Michael Anderson.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited because I spent some time in a previous career in Jakarta, in Indonesia, about 18 years ago. And coming back and hearing the vision and the goals that you have as an organization, it's really inspiring to me. And to achieve these goals and to get where you're going to want to go, I know it from my own businesses, and I know it from working with leaders at some of the top companies in the world, that it does start with the leader's mindset. And it's going to start with the leaders on the lower levels of the organization, but first and foremost, it's going to start with your leadership mindset. Because to achieve what I hear you want to achieve about being one of the leading public companies in Indonesia, about managing this transition, and you have a very, very complex, when I heard last night at our dinner about 70,000 islands, is that correct? 35,000 some have electricity. Amazing, it blows my mind. And you're going through probably the largest transition that PLN will ever go through. So you've got a lot going on, but it's doable. But what's also really interesting to me is that PLN touches every single Indonesian's life, doesn't it? And so you touch all the different businesses, all the different organizations out there, and that's why this is so fun for me, because I love working with bold leaders. And I love sharing what I learned in my life, and I'll tell you why this is especially important to me. Because leadership for me was very, very difficult. I got into leadership, I started my first company, we had some success, and I realized I was out of my depth. I didn't know what I was doing. And I needed to fix that. And I got some amazing education. I got trained and mentored by some of the best leaders out there. And I turned it around. I had some success. And now I help leaders. And it was a mindset shift in me. And that's what I help leaders do around the world now. And I'm going to share 5 things, 5 of the most important things that shifted my mindset, and it's the 5 things that shift other leaders' mindsets from around the world. And so you're going to go away from this with 5 things that you're going to use in your life. Does that make sense? I'll share those 5 things. Yeah, good. Before that, I want to tell you a little bit about my story, but I feel so far from you. This is an amazing stage, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around to get a little bit closer to everybody, if that's okay. Because I'm going to tell you a bit of a personal story. And I know we're streaming this. Is this okay from the camera's point of view? Everybody got me here? Good. So just a little bit about me. I live in the UK now. I married a lovely British woman, so I live outside of London. But I grew up in America. I know this isn't a Balinese accent. I'm not from Lombok or anything. I'm not Indonesia, but yeah. So I did grow up in America. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Anybody ever hear of Pittsburgh? Yeah, a couple people. Good. In the UK, I tell people they don't really know where Pittsburgh is either. I say it's like the Liverpool of the UK. It's a bit blue collar, it rains a lot, and we got a really good football team. But then I tell them it's American football, the real football, and they get a little bit angry when I say that because they like their football. That was just joking aside. I grew up there, and it was a great way. It's a nice place to grow up. But I was really, really nerdy. I was really, really geeky when I grew up. When I was 13 years old, my dad bought me, I'm 53 now, so this is a long time ago, my dad bought me an Apple II clone, one of the first personal computers ever came out. And at 13, I taught myself programming in my basement. When I got a little older, when I got 16 or 17 or 18, instead of me and my friends going out to parties, we would buy the latest video card or the latest RAM for our computers, and we'd play the latest video games. Needless to say, when I was in school, I was not one of the cool kids, right? But I really enjoyed it. And so after university, I got a job and as the low-level IT guy in a large engineering software company. And if you're working in your office and your printer breaks and you call down to IT and they send this young person up, and that young person's like has to crawl under your desk to see if all the wires are connected to make sure your printer works, that was me. But at 2 meters 3 or 6'8", that's not a pretty sight, me crawling under a desk. But that's where I started. That's where I started. And I had a cousin in California, and I was 23, 24 at the time, and he said, "How's it going out there, Mike?" I'm like, "Well, I got a job I really don't like that much, but other than that, it's okay." And he said, "Well, if you have a job you don't like that much, why don't you come out to California and have a job you don't like in California instead of Pennsylvania?" And I'm like, there's a lot of wisdom in that because California has the beach and the sun, et cetera. So I drove out to California, and I got my first job in software. And I helped that company scale. And then it got acquired. I moved to London and then Denmark. And then I moved over to Singapore, where I got to work with some Indonesian companies. And that was great because I learned a lot about software. I learned a lot about business. Then in my mid-30s, around 34 years old, I moved back to California and I founded my first software company. And there was a gap in the marketplace, and we had a lot of success very quickly. And next thing you know, all of a sudden, I have an office, I have employees, I have attorneys, I have bankers, all this stuff I'd never had to deal with before. We had so much success, I was on the front page of the newspaper. And we were growing, we were scaling, we were profitable. And everybody would come up to me and they're like, "Oh, Mike, you have this amazing life. You're the leader of this company, you're well known in the company, you're well known around California." But that's what it looked like on the outside, but that's not what it was on the inside. Because to get really honest with you, I felt like a fraud. I felt like an imposter. I did not have the emotional intelligence. I did not have the support. I was not ready for that level of responsibility. I felt so, it just came, it was crushing down on me, all that responsibility. And my biggest fear during all that is it was somebody would find out that I didn't know what I was doing. Everybody else would find out and it would all come crashing down. And I went through that period of my life in a state of fear. And that's not how you want to show up as a leader. And then, as life and the universe does to us, it starts giving us more and more things to make us look at ourselves to grow. And so what happened, a very difficult time in my life. I was going through a divorce. I had a business partner that I gave some equity to. We got in a disagreement. He assaulted me. I had to file a restraining order against him. We went into a nasty, nasty business lawsuit. And there's a long, dramatic story. We don't have time for all that story today, so you have to wait for the Netflix special. Or you can go to YouTube. It's going to be on YouTube as well. But it was the hardest time I ever went through in my life. Really sent me into a tailspin. And I'm like, what is going on? You know, I've always wanted to own a business. And here I am owning a successful business, and I finally achieved it, but I hate my life. I hated it. And I'm like, I got to figure out this life thing, and I got to figure out this leadership thing. And that's what I did. I'm like, look, I'm a good doer. And so why don't I set my doing on becoming happy and becoming a great leader? And that's what I did. I read books. I got coaches. I found the best trainers. And I also did something really, really interesting. At that time, I joined a peer group of entrepreneurs, business owners. And a couple of them just had a very peaceful way about them. And up until then, I had a lot of success in a lot of areas, but I never had any inner peace. And I found out that they both went through this program, and I signed up. After I met them, I just pretty much signed up out of hope. And I ended up earning a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Spiritual psychology. Now, the next question is, what's spiritual psychology? It's nothing to do with religion. It's a very compassionate view of psychology. We learned 6 different psychoanalysis techniques: NLP, Gestalt, rational motive, et cetera, et cetera. We learned it from a place of pure compassion, of pure love, if you will. And it was life-changing for me. It changed my personal life, but when I started applying what I learned there to my businesses, because at that time I owned 2 in California, 1 in Singapore, we really started to thrive because I was really making connections with my employees. We really understood each other as humans. We were giving great value to our customers, and we were giving back to the community, which I think we all want to do as leaders. We just don't always know how to get there. And it was, and that's when we were on the Inc. We made the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies. We won the #1 best place to work, and I won Social Entrepreneur of the Year. That was externally, but internally, leadership was finally fun. Because to me, leadership is a place of service. When you're at your best as a leader, you're watching your employees grow and develop. You're delivering to your customers, and that's really where the fun, to me, in leadership is. And after a while, I ran my companies, and after 25 years in accounting software, I thought it was time for a change. And I know what you're thinking. When you mix accounting and software, there's nothing more fun in the world. I know, I get it. I was sort of a rock star in the accounting software world, but it was time for a change. And so over the last 10 years, I've sold my 3 companies, and now I work with some of the highest achievers in the world and some of the largest companies in the world, and I teach them how to keep evolving their mindset. Because the evolution, like this gentleman said, the evolution is never done as a leader. And so if you're thinking, hey, I got it covered as a leader, that's a blind spot. It's what can you do more? How can you change? How can you keep evolving? How can you keep challenging yourself to get to the next level and the next level and the next level? And that's really what I teach everybody. Because if we look at what happens to leadership, whoa, back. This is called the leadership incompetence trap. The leadership incompetence trap. Who here started out their career as an engineer? Started out here. How long did it take you to an education to become an engineer? How many years?
University?
Yes.
5 years.
5 years in university. And then how long before you were like a good engineer? How long for work did you were like a good engineer to get promoted to leadership?
I think it took like another 8 years.
Yes. So let's say 12 years. It took you 12 years to get through to leadership. So you're in a leadership position now, correct?
Yeah.
Did they give you 12 years of leadership training?
No.
That's exactly right. And thank you for answering honestly, but that's what happens. What it is we get promoted because we're good at things, because we're a good marketer, we're good at finance, and we spend our whole career. I mean, if you're a CFO, you go to your undergraduate, maybe you get a master's in finance, and then you're a really good CFO, and then you're promoted to leadership. And most people, what do? They get like a three-day course on leadership. And then they wonder why it's difficult. Well, leadership's really, really hard, just like being an engineer is, but we don't give it what it needs. And that's why we have the leadership incompetence trap. And there's a thing called the Peter Principle. Has anybody ever heard of the Peter Principle? It says, it's very old, it's from the 70s, and it talks about how people get promoted into their level of incompetence, so we keep promoting people until they don't do, hey, you did a good job, you're getting promoted, you did a good job, you're getting promoted. Until they don't do a good job, they don't get promoted. But it's not their level of incompetence. The fact is they're not getting the support and the training they need. And I'll tell you, as I hear about PLN and I hear about the PLN University for leadership, it's great because there's continuous learning here. So I really applaud what you're doing, and I really applaud that you do things like this, so you are getting the right support. But what I want everybody to be clear on, and you might know this by one part, but it's really clear that you know this, and everything I teach is applicable to you, the leader, as well as your team, as well as the people that you affect. That you need to keep working on your leadership, because once you're a junior level manager, you need to learn one set of skills, then you get to be a director, you need another set of skills, then you, et cetera, and as a board level, you need another set of skills. So it's not that you learn leadership, but you keep learning leadership for that level, and you keep supporting yourself with that level. Because if you don't do that, all the statistics say that leadership is not good the world over. And that's why the book is called Leadership Mindset 2.0, because Leadership Mindset 1.0 is at the top-down view of leadership. It's, I'm the boss, do what I say. And that doesn't work. The statistics, the experience, that doesn't work. And if you have millennials in your team and you want to get ready for this new wave of young people coming in, they have amazing energy and they're really, really bright and they will work really hard. But you have to motivate them. They're not going to take orders. They're not going to be keen on taking orders. But then you're not getting what you need out of them. You're not getting the creativity out of them. You're not getting their best. They're not giving their heart. Nobody really likes to take orders. What they like to do is be empowered. And that's what you need to do as the leader, is you need to be the person empowering them. And I talked about leadership is like an apartment building, for example. When you start out in leadership, you're on the ground level. Or when you start out your career, you're on the ground level. That might mean you're working with 1 or 2 clients. That might mean that you're starting your role as a marketer, as a salesperson, whatever it is. And the thing is, almost everybody starts out on that level. But then the more you get promoted, the more you move up in the metaphorical building. And as you move up, what happens? You get more and more responsibility, right? And then you get more salary, right? It's like paying more rent. You get more salary. You have that more responsibility. There's more at stake. But also you can see more and you can affect more. Most people are good at their job is because they like making a positive effect in the organization. And when you get into leadership, you can affect more people. You can help more people out. It's a different skill set, though. And the higher you move up in the building, the more salary you get, the more responsibility you get, and the more people you can affect. But that's the constant evolution of this mindset. And so that's really what we need to do. And in an organization like PLN, you have to make sure you have great people in all the different levels and all the different floors. And that's your job also, is to make sure your team's also moving up in there as well. So my first mindset shift is leading others starts with yourself. Leading others starts with yourself. This is about you as a leader and how you show up. A lot of leaders come to me and they're like, I'm having a problem with this, I'm having a problem with this person, I'm having a problem with this person. I said, okay, we're going to look at you. They're like, well, the problem's not with me, the problem's with that person, that person, that person. I'm like, no, we start with you. Everything I do starts with yourself, because mindset's an internal thing. And what do I mean by this? I have a foundational rule of leadership that's taught in the book. It says, your leadership is a reflection of the relationship with yourself. Now, what this means is deep down, this is based on a psychological concept called a projection. If deep, deep, deep down, you don't trust yourself, there's a little missing thing there that you don't trust yourself, then your team might say, Michael's a nice person, but I just have this little distrust. I just can't buy all the way into where he's at. Because people have great intuition. And we can only put up this wall so much. If people ask me what the number one thing, when I went through this program and I learned and I changed myself as a leader, what's the number one thing that I changed about myself? I realized that I was trying to be the person everybody else wanted me to be. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be liked. So I spent all this time trying to be this Michael that wasn't truly me. And I was insecure. I really wanted that outside validation. But through a lot of work, I got to understand who I was. And not just understand who I was, I got to know, like, and trust myself. Know, like, and trust. I got to know who I was. And I got to like who that person is. And I got to trust that that person can take me and the team forward. And a lot of us don't know who we are. We're trying to be something else. But once we do, this is where great leadership happens, because your team wants to know who you are. Your team wants to know what you stand for. That's where you get loyalty. That's where you get inspiration. That's where you get people really following you. Because when you're authentic and when you're vulnerable and you stand in who you are, that's attractive to people. That's what great leaders do. If we take two things, if we take shyness, if shyness is over here when people are shy, and then over here we have arrogance, both are born out of insecurity about not knowing, liking, and trusting yourself. So when you're shy, what happens is you don't trust yourself, so you don't put yourself forward. You try to hide, right? Whether it's in a meeting, whether you don't introduce yourself, you don't go for promotions. That's what shyness is, because I don't believe in myself. Now, what arrogance is I don't want people to truly see me, so I go on the attack. I go on the offensive. I put in over this hard wall in front of me. Both are people that both are born out of insecurity. And for me, when I was insecure back then, I didn't know, like, and trust myself. I would go from shy to arrogant, trying to protect myself. But in the middle here is this beautiful place called confidence, between shyness and arrogance. And if you think of a leader you really respect, maybe it's in business, somebody you look up to, maybe it's in business, maybe politics, maybe sports, maybe somewhere else, maybe in your family. They have a confidence about them. People are drawn to confidence. And when I say confidence, that doesn't mean you know all the answers. That means you have confidence that you and the team are going to get over whatever hurdle comes forward. And confidence often isn't loud. Confidence is often having the ability to stay quiet and only talk and only bring something forward in a powerful moment. How many times have you been in a meeting and there's that one person that just sits and listens, but then they say that one thing that changes the whole dynamic of the meeting? That's confidence. And confidence is what people follow. Confidence is what people inspire. And that's really where we need to get you. And look, we all have insecurities. I have insecurities every day. But it's accepting those insecurities, it's coming into that place of trust and belief in yourself. And that bleeds into your team, and that's really where greatness is created as a leader. I teach what's called growth leadership. And if you look at this, if you have what I call the goal line, if you move ahead on the goal line, it's like you make more money. As I move further this way on the goal line, that means I'm making more money, I drive a nicer car, I have a better house, etc. The goal line is you're achieving goals in the real world. But learning line is you learn. You learn as a person. You become what you call more conscious. You have more emotional intelligence. You're a better communicator. You learn these different soft skills. Now, to be honest, it's relatively easy to move on one line or the other. If you just want to make money in this world, you can make money in this world. If you just want to grow in this world, you can grow in this world. I mean, I think we'd all know a lot of people that make a lot of money, but they aren't nice people. They don't really like themselves, right? We know people like this. You also might know people on the learning line. I joke that sometimes everybody has this friend and they're just really happy all the time and really connected, but they never have like a good job. They're always scrambling around for money. What's really difficult is to move on both lines at the same time. Because I'll tell you what, as you make more money, as you get promoted, we have that more responsibility. So what happens is our ego plays little tricks on us. And we'll talk about the ego and the authentic self. And so what happens is every time I get promoted, I'm tested on the learning line. Do I have the confidence in myself to do this? Can I learn these new skills? Can I really keep showing up as the person I need to show up? So that's really what I'm here to do, is support you to do, is to help you keep moving ahead in the organization as you keep learning and evolving. So mindset shift number 2 is embrace your role as a leader. The reason I said this is, how many times have you ever met somebody at like a networking event, or you meet somebody new and they ask what you do? How many people here have ever said, "Hi, I'm a leader"? No? Why not? If you have a team, your definition literally is a leader. But why is it so weird that you call yourself a leader? I've never done that either, just to tell you, but it's just a weird thing. But why would it be so weird? Like, your job is to lead a team. Why is it so weird to call yourself a leader? But this is identity. I work a lot with identities. Like, how do you look at yourself? How do you picture yourself? If you're in this room, you're a leader. Your job is a leader. Your role is a leader. And if you started out, I'm working with this great dynamic entrepreneur in Germany, and he was a developer. And now he runs a marketing company, one of the top Shopify agencies in Germany. It took him 5 years of owning this company and scaling this company before he realized and started internally calling himself a leader. What we get is a lot of people that I call them reluctant leaders. Oh yeah, I'm a finance person, but I guess I'm a CFO, so I'm a sort of leader. I'm in a leadership role, but I'm really a finance person. Or I came out of engineering, but I'm really an engineer at heart. But I'm in a leadership position, but I'm really an engineer. No, you're a leader. We need you to become a leader. And that's why during the growth leadership path, to really help people evolve as leaders, the first thing we do is release and reset. That's the first thing you need to do, because Marshall Goldsmith, one of my mentors and one of the first executive coaches out there, he wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Now, me as a programmer, if you looked at my skill set to become a business owner, to become successful, my skill set as a programmer, I was very analytical. I'm a bit introverted. I would take one problem and get my teeth into it and not stop until I solved that problem. But then I got into leadership. And those aren't necessarily bad traits to have as a leader, but that's not what moves the needle as a leader. As a leader, you have to be a great communicator, a great listener, a great motivator, and a great inspirer. I got 0 of those in my training as a programmer. So I have to reskill. Not only reskill, when we get good at things, when things like being analytical help my progression, that's my comfort zone, so I go back to them very quickly. So whatever got you into leadership, when there becomes, for example, problems, you're going to want to go back to that person. But what we need you to do is be the coach, be the person that empowers, be the person that creates that team, instead of going back to your old habits. So you have to release a lot of things to really get into leadership. And then rewire and reprogram to really have those new skills as a leader. The third step is leading others, so we need a team. So what motivates and inspires people? And then the fourth is strategy and influence. And I bring this up because some of this is taught already, but it's number 1, release and reset, and then it's number 4, strategy and influence, that I don't see taught a lot. Now, I don't mean having a strategy, I mean being strategic. How many of you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you in the back of your mind, look, I have to be more strategic. I have to show up more strategically. I need to help my team be more strategic. Having a strategy is pretty easy. You guys probably go away for 3 days or 5 days once a year. You develop the strategy. Strategy is normally developed in a workshop, and then it's laid out. Having a strategy is the easy part nowadays. It's how do you, as a leader and a manager, every decision you make is a strategic decision. How are you strategically thinking? We're going to cover a little bit of that because it's really, really important, but it's one of the things that is least taught in leadership. Mindset shift 3, move from your ego to your authentic self. So if we talk about the inner consciousness, our consciousness has 2 sides to it. It has the ego, and it has the authentic self. And you might have heard these terms before, but be careful, because there's more than one definition for them, even in different schools of psychology. Over in the authentic self, this is our natural resting place. When we feel safe, we are in our authentic self. And our authentic self is when we can connect to other people, when we can think creatively, when we're at our best as a leader. When we perceive that there is a threat out there, we shift into our ego. Now, what do I mean by this? You'll know you're in your ego because you'll become closed, you'll become defensive. This is a protection mechanism. We are wired to easily go into our ego because for the last 20,000 years, we needed to physically protect ourselves up until a couple generations ago. So our wiring is to easily shift into the ego when we perceive that there is a threat out there. The thing is, our body doesn't know the difference between whether there's a man-eating dinosaur that we need to protect ourselves with, or I'm in an important meeting and the CEO asked me a question I'm not ready for. We have the same stress response. Because what happens is we have this little guy called the amygdala in our brain. It's always looking for threats. Whenever it perceives there's a threat, it sends a message to, this is a little bit of neuroscience, to the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal glands, and they send chemicals into our bloodstream. So this is a chemical reaction of when we're in a state of stress. And you'll know this because if you've ever been in a car and you think for that split second you're going to die, which I know in Jakarta happens a lot, right? You're there and somebody like cuts you off, you're like, whoa, and then a second later, you know you're safe, but you're still like shaking, right? You got that. That's adrenaline and cortisol. Those are chemicals. That takes you into this ego mindset. Now, if we look at what poor leadership is, I normally ask people what poor leadership is. They say it's micromanaging. It's putting blame on other people. It's taking other people's success as our own. It's being closed. See how all those are people in their ego, or are leaders trying to protect themselves? Those are all ego-based activities. So that's what happens when we're in our ego. That's where poor leadership comes from. However, when we can lead from our authentic self, because I ask people, what is great leadership? What does that look like? Well, that's when you empower people. That's when you're open. That's when you listen. That's when you connect with people. You can only do that when you know you're safe. Google calls this psychological safety. So you need to regulate. If there's one hack in this world, if you leave with the most simple thing that I could ever share with you, anytime you go into a meeting, for example, or you go into a phone call, or you in any situation with your kids or your spouse or whatever it is, just ask yourself, am I in my ego or my authentic self? Because you can never be at both in one time. You can be further in your ego, you can be further in your authentic self. And oftentimes, just by asking yourself, am I in my ego or my authentic self? Maybe I'm having a phone call with somebody who intimidates me or can be, or I get a really hard energy from. And I'm just about to get on that phone call and I say, hey, right now, am I in my ego or my authentic self? Oh, I'm a little bit in my ego. I can feel myself about to defend myself. I can say, well, normally just by asking yourself, you'll shift at least into neutral. You can challenge yourself, how would I show up in my authentic self right now? And then you show up, and then you're showing up as that connected leader that you want to be. So that's yourself. Everything, again, I teach you starts with yourself and then goes to your team. Now, your job as a leader is to take your team and move them into their authentic selves because they run into the same thing too. I mean, what happens is maybe I have a great young employee, and she's been doing a great job, and I invite her to a higher level meeting. And she gets to this higher level meeting, and normally she interacts with people really well, but I could tell, she's sitting with closed body language. I ask her a question or two, she just answers with a yes or a no. And I know that that's not how she normally shows up. What's happening? She's in her ego, right? Because she's not comfortable in this. That's okay. I get in my ego too when I'm not comfortable in things. But this is an opportunity for you as a leader to spend some time with her and coach her, to tell her how much you believe in her, and to help her gain her confidence. And I'll tell you what, when you start doing that with your employees, first of all, you're building other employees, but you're creating relationships for life. You're helping them grow as a person, and they will be loyal to you for the rest of their career. And that's your job. Your job is to move everybody into their authentic self. Because when you have a conversation with somebody, and maybe that's a customer, and you can tell they're in their ego, a conversation with somebody in their ego is never going to go well because they're just trying to protect themselves. They're just trying to get out of that conversation protected. And so if you see somebody else is in their ego, and you can bring them to their authentic self, you can have an amazing conversation. And that might be listening, asking them what's wrong, letting them get that off their chest, whatever that is, and really connecting with them. And that's a great way. That's one of the key things, I think, in life and as a leader we need to do. But I'll tell you a couple stories about myself and my ego, because I I always want to tell you, look, I learned all this stuff myself. I learned it the hard way. My job is to help you go through these a little quicker than I did. That's my whole job here. So in California, I went to a networking event, and I think we've all been to networking events, right, where you go just to meet other business people. So I drive, and I park, and I walk into this place, and I see 3 people talking to themselves. As I walk in, I see 3 people talking to themselves, and I could tell by their body language they didn't know each other really well. So this is a great place for me to go and introduce myself and meet people, because that's why I came to this meeting. So I start walking over to them, and out of the corner of my eye, I spot the drinks. And for some unknown reason, instead of going up and talking to them, I pivoted, and I went and got myself a drink. So 3 minutes later, I'm sitting there, I'm holding my Coca-Cola, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the biggest loser in the world. I just came to this networking event to meet people, and for some unknown reason, I'm standing here alone, sipping on my drink. I'm like, what was that about? I had a fear right there. I had a fear. Anybody want to guess what that fear was? I had a fear of failure, a fear of rejection, which is crazy. How many times have you ever met somebody and you're like, hi, how you doing? They're like, hi, I don't like you. Ever happen? It's crazy. It's an irrational fear of rejection. It's an irrational fear of failure. But I had it. Here I was in my late 30s, owning a successful software company, and my ego still changed my behavior. Now, I met a guy one time, and he travels all the time for work, and a lot of us travel for work, and we know when you travel for work, it often means if somebody's not nice enough to take you around, it means eating alone. And he's like, hey, I hate to eat alone, so I go find somebody to eat with. I'm like, what do you mean you find somebody to eat with? He goes, well, I go down to the hotel or restaurant, and I just ask people if I can join them for dinner. And I'm like, that's actually pretty weird. How does that work? He goes, well, yeah, I just introduce myself, tell them what I'm trying to do. I'm like, wow. So what's your success rate, like 90, 95%? He's like, no, 30, 35. I'm like, so it's like a no, yes? He's like, yeah, a no, yes. I'm like, you're my hero. I mean, that is amazing. Can you imagine having that confidence in yourself to just introduce yourself to people at a hotel restaurant because you want to meet with people? I'm like, how do you do it? He's like, well, if they say no, they're not saying no to me. They're at a business meeting, they're tired, whatever it is. He's like, maybe they don't like me. I don't really care. I'm like, wow, that's very, very inspiring to me. Very, very inspiring. Now, that reminds me of another situation where I met a lady for coffee, and this is, again, when I had my software companies, because we could potentially pass each other business, a referral source. So we have a nice 20-minute, 25-minute coffee, which I've had 1,000 times. And it was just really easy, really nice conversation. And then we got back, and we had a couple little follow-ups. And as I got back, about an hour after I got back from the coffee, she sent me an email that basically said, I know we just met, but I don't really like you, so I'm not going to follow up with you anymore. I was like, what? That was really weird. I'm like, she doesn't like me. Huh. Like, whoa, maybe nobody likes me. Maybe she's just the only one that's actually said it. And it really sent me to a spiral for about an hour. I'm like thinking about myself. I'm like, did I say something wrong, during the coffee? No, we just talked about really basic stuff. I didn't say anything wrong. And like, where else is this happening in my life that I don't know about it? And it really got me like questioning like every part of my life. It was really an intense situation. But then I realized it was one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever given me, because you know what? I realized that not everybody's going to like me. I know that sounds simple, but it was once I told myself, not everybody's going to like me, and I'm okay with that. It's one of the most freeing thoughts one of the most freeing mindset shifts I've ever had. Because I realized, I look back, I reflect, I'm very self-reflective. I look back, how many times have you been in a group and you've said something or not said something because you wanted to fit in? Yeah. And I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to be me. And if people don't like that, that's cool. I'm okay with that. Some people don't like tall, gangly Americans. I'm all right with that. It's who I am. I get excited about stuff or whatever that is. I'm showing up more like that. The funny thing is, the more I do that, probably the more people do like me. That's the converse to that. And that's what I do. And I go up, and now when I'm at a networking event or something, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go up and introduce myself to this person, and they may or may not like me. And sometimes I meet people, I'm like, hey, I just really don't jive with them, so I go talk to somebody that I really enjoy talking with. Because I got a secret for you. I don't like everybody I meet either. I know, it's crazy. You all are okay. I met everybody here. You guys, I like everybody here. But sometimes, it's all right. That's all right. That's part of life. And so that's what I mean about liking and trusting ourselves and really showing up as who we are as leaders and overcoming that ego and overcoming that. Because there's two things. There's fitting in and belonging. What fitting in means is, look, there's a group of people, and I'm going to try to be like them to be accepted. I'm going to try to be like them to be accepted. And I get caught in that all the time. Like, oh, I see a group of people. Maybe I look up to them, maybe whatever it is. I'm like, oh, I really want them to like me and accept me. But that's ego. That's me trying to step out of my true identity, my authentic self. Now what I do, it's like, look, if there's this group of people, I'm going to come and be myself. And if they like that, that's a great group for me. And if they don't, that's totally okay. I respect that. Maybe that's not the right group for me. We hear about authenticity. Everybody hears about authenticity and vulnerability in leadership, correct? Yep, how it's a good thing. It is a good thing, but don't ever tell anybody to be more authentic or more vulnerable. Because being authentic and vulnerable is a conclusion. It's the outcome of different things. It's like trying to tell somebody to be more funny. They're not going to be more funny. You can't tell somebody to be more funny. You can teach them how to tell jokes. You can teach them different things, but you can't tell anybody to be more funny. But authenticity, and I'll give you an example. Say you were in a flight. Say you were taking a flight, and the pilot jumps out of the cabin, and she's like, oh my gosh, there's a problem with the plane. I don't know how to fix it. Was she authentic? Yes. Was she vulnerable? Yes. Was that a good move? Yeah, probably not. Probably not. So there's a healthy way of authenticity and vulnerability, and an unhealthy way. We have to really understand what the difference is, because we need to be authentic and vulnerable to our team. But we always need to be vulnerable and authentic with the security in ourselves. Because people, your team, they always need to have the hope that they see in you. During the pandemic, I coached a lot of business owners who went through, some of them, the most difficult time in their lives. I mean, they had to, sell offices, lay off many people just to keep the business alive. And I'm like, when you you need to address your employees as a group. And when you address your employees, you have to be 100% certain that your organization is going to survive this. Because if you're 99% certain, they're going to pick up on that 1%, and they're going to be worried. And if you're not 99%, we got to work to have you show up 100%. And you always need, leadership is difficult. We always need to have this inner belief. And it's not fair. Sometimes I don't have this inner belief. Sometimes we all go through ups and downs as people. And if you don't address your team like that. You have to. That's why it's so important as a leader for you to have this inner belief and to cultivate this inner belief into you and the team, because that's what they want. They want this belief. They want this faith. They want this hope. And a lot of what inspiration is you bringing it. It's a way of being. It's not what you say. It's how you say it. It's the energy you show up with, and you have to deliver. Some people call that executive presence, and that's something that's absolutely that we absolutely work on. Mindset shift 4. I'm going to take a sip of my water before I head back up. Is this helpful a little bit? Is this helpful? Yes. Good. If you had all said no, I don't know what we do for the next 20 minutes, so we're on the right track. So embody alignment, integrity, and ownership. What this means is to have a truly high-performing team and a truly high-performing organization. You need alignment. You need alignment in your values and your purpose and your vision. That means you have a vision for the organization. If you run a department or you run a subsidiary or whatever it is, even if you run a programming team or an engineering team, you need to have a values and a purpose and a vision for your team that aligns with both your personality, who you are as a leader, and the company as a whole. So the vision and the purpose and the values isn't just for the organization, it's for you and your team. You have to get clear about who you are as a person, what you stand for, what the purpose of your team is, and you have to communicate that. People should know that. Who is it? The guy who wrote Scaling Up. Vern Harnish says, if your employees aren't making fun of you because you're talking about the vision and the values of the purpose, you're not saying them enough. Everybody has to be so clear on what the values of your team is, the purpose of the team, and the vision of the team. If you're in an accounting department, you're going to have a different vision and purpose and values than a sales department, which is okay. They all roll up to the same thing, but your purpose of your accounting department might be we need to have great record keeping and put out the reports on a timely basis. That's our vision and our purpose and things like that. So don't think just because you're lower in the organization or you're not the CEO, you don't have these things. But whatever they are, they have to support the overall vision. And so you really need to get clear on these, and every one of your employees should be able to tell you at a moment's notice what the values, purpose, and the vision is and how they contribute to that. And so that, if you don't have that now, that's really something for you to work on. So that's what I mean by alignment. And until you have them, you're never going to have a high-performing team. Let's talk about integrity next. Integrity next. How many people tell somebody they're going to send somebody something on a Wednesday, but then they send it Thursday, first thing in the morning? You're like, oh, it's okay, it's pretty much Wednesday, and then they do that. So if you're doing that, oftentimes you don't think that's a big deal, but if you're on the receiving end of that, you're like, oh my gosh, they sent it Wednesday, and here I am getting it Thursday. People notice this. People higher up than you, your peers, and people below you notice this. How many people want their team to be on time for everything, but show up late to meetings themselves? Interesting. I was working on a strategic session with an organization, and Ryan, the CEO, sent me their values, and one of them was tight. So we started the strategic session. I'm like, I don't understand this value tight. What is that? He's like, well, I want everybody to run a tight ship. I want everybody to be prepared to be on meetings on time. I'm like, oh, interesting, Ryan. Are you tight? He's like, yeah, I'm tight. I'm like, really? You were 10 minutes late to our last meeting, and the meeting before that you forgot. So are you tight? Well, I'm not tight, but I want everybody else to be tight. That doesn't work. If you want to stand in your integrity and you want to ask things of other people, you need to do it better than they do it, better than you expect them to do it. It's hard. It's hard. But you need to do this, because if not, there's a mistrust. Why is he asking me to do it when he is not doing it? There's a mistrust. There's mistrust in alignment. There's mistrust in integrity. So where can you clean up your integrity? And this isn't just to other people. This is to yourself. How many times do you meet a friend on the sidewalk and you're like, oh, hey, great to see you. We haven't seen each other for a while. I should call you. We should have a coffee together. And you know you're not going to call them, right? Why did you just make a promise that you're not going to keep? Why don't you just say, hey, nice to see you? Or how many times do you see a book, you're like, I got to read that book? If I could fill this stage with books that I told myself, I got to read this book, I got to read this book, and I can't get to all those books. What if you just, and what I've worked to do is I change the dialogue with myself. It would be nice to read that book. Because one is making a promise to myself that I don't know if I'm going to commit. And then the other is saying, it's nice, it's leaving myself off the hook. So when we look at our inner dialogue, how are we treating ourselves, and what type of integrity? There's always integrity you can clean up with yourself and with other people. And then ownership, taking ownership. Now, you probably are in a leadership position because you're good at taking ownership. What do I mean by that? Instead of playing the victim, you go get things done. But I'm going to challenge you, because leaders can always take another step of ownership. And I'll give you a great example of how this works in practice. Now, one of my friends was coaching a CEO of a medium-sized company, and this CEO was not getting along with his main salesperson. She was there for a long time. She'd sold a lot of product, but they really were at a loggerheads. It was getting to the point where they would get into arguments a couple times a week, and it was disruptive for the other employees. And my friend tried to work with them both for a little while. He couldn't get them on the same page. Then finally the CEO is like, I'm going to fire her. I own the company. I'm the CEO. I'm tired of dealing with her. So my friend looked at it, and she actually accounted for 40% of their new product sales, as one person for 40% of the new product sales. And if you get rid of 40% of your new product sales, that's going to set your organization back years. So my buddy told the CEO, he's like, I got one more thing for you to try. He's like, what's that? He said, I think you should apologize to her. It's like, apologize to her. She's wrong. She's an idiot. She's this. She's that. So my buddy holds up the roster of employees. He's like, well, which half are you going to let go? Because if you let go of her, you might as well just lay off half the rest of your company because you're going to lay them off anyway. It's like, well, I don't want to do that. So what does this apology look like? And so my buddy worked with him. And the next day, the CEO went to the lady, and he said, hey, can I take you to lunch? Of course, she thinks she's getting fired at lunch, right? That's what I would think. She says yes, and so they have a really awkward drive to the lunch place. They sit down and get ready to go to lunch, and they order, and it's very awkward. And the CEO takes a deep breath. He just says, I apologize. You've actually been doing a great job selling. You've been doing your job. But me, as a CEO, I've not been supporting you. So you've been doing your job, and I've been failing you as a CEO, and I'm sorry. And then he said there was the most of it. Then she just looked at him for like 10 really uncomfortable seconds. He had no idea what was going to happen. And she burst into tears. She said, thank you. Thank you. I've been working hard, and we used to get along really well, and now she said, you know what, I'm sorry. I've been acting like a child too. And then they got together and they had the most amazing conversation after that. And she had all these great ideas she never brought up to him because he wouldn't listen to him anyway. And next thing you know, fast forward a couple years, she's VP of sales, they get along great, and they're in a whole nother stratosphere because of how he did that. Now, if you look at what happened? He could have easily fired her and said, she's this, she's an idiot. He had complete justification for firing her, right? But what's his job? His job is to move the company forward. So and he cannot control her. He can only control how he shows up. So he took his ego, right, and put it in his back pocket. And what he did is he took ownership of the situation because he had a role in the situation, and he took ownership for that. And I find when we take really deep ownership for things, other people take ownership as well, which is what she did. And he did a great service to his company. And he didn't even know how she'd react. She could have said, you're stupid and I quit anyway. But she didn't. But that's the level of ownership we need to take as leaders. And so just think about your situation. Where is there not a good situation? Where is there not a good relationship? Where can you take ownership? Where can you show up as a powerful leader? Put your ego into the back pocket and really get things back on track. It's hard sometimes, but it's really, really rewarding when you do that. Mindset shift 5. So we talked about becoming more strategic. So becoming strategic is a mindset shift in itself. So we're going to talk about 3 things you can do to become strategic. Now, being tactical is an addiction. Being tactical is an addiction. So what happens is normally we get into leadership because we're good at solving problems. Say you come from you're a salesperson and now you're a sales leader. And as a salesperson for years, for maybe a decade, what would happen is you would close a sale with a customer. Everybody would be like, great job, Mike. And you'd feel good, right? And neurologically, that sends a little bit of dopamine into your body, like, I really feel good. Now, you're a sales manager, and you're not closing deals because you're having other people close deals, so you're missing that little hit of dopamine. But what happens is you miss that dopamine, So if one of your salespeople is about to close a deal, you're like, I'm going to ride along with you, and you take over the meeting and you close the deal. And you're like, hey, Mike, great job. You closed the deal. You get that hit of dopamine. But what did you do? You just disempowered that salesperson. So that salesperson like, well, why should I even bring something? Why should I even close deals? And all of a sudden, you're taking yourself out of this strategic area into the tactics, because I work with all these leaders. They're like, oh, I don't have any time to be strategic. That's because they're addicted, because dopamine is addictive. This chemical is addictive. It's the same one you get when you scroll Facebook and like those little things. So what you have to do is you have to realize that you're always going to want to go back to the things that made you successful. That's a human nature type thing. You have to stop doing that. I'm not saying you never, help out with the sales process or you never work with a problem client, but just think about how can you empower your team? How can you do that? Because you're naturally going to want to do that. So that's becoming strategic is really you getting clear about how you need to move out of the tactics. Second is you need to learn the language of strategy. I work with so many people, and we get them to the board level, and then they show up to their first board meeting, and they realize they have no idea how to interact with everybody else. You need to learn the language of strategy. And what I mean by that is, if you talk to a CMO, a chief marketing officer, and you talk to a COO, and you have a CFO, they all have different things that they're concerned about. They have different things that drive their job. And what you need to do is you need to change how if you talk to one day, the COO the next day, and the CMO the third day, you can talk to them about the same subject, but you change what words you use to make it relevant to what's important to them. And if you don't know what's important, the difference between what is important to a CMO, a COO, a CFO, you need to learn that. Because that's what they're looking for. It's like, hey, they realize you're running a division, you're running a team, but they need to know how that relates to them. And you need to know how to take this and give it to them in this, because they got 8,000 things going on. So you can't be the technical person that goes on and on and on and on. You need to summarize these things. So you need to change how you speak the higher up you get into an organization. And that's going to facilitate your promotion and your growth, and they're going to bring you into the inner circle. The third thing is thinking strategically is a reflective process. If you have meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, you're not thinking strategically. The only way you think strategically, I'm not talking about having the strategy. I'm talking about you being able to have it. Every single decision you should make as a leader should have a strategic bent to it. The new hire you have, how are you going to organize this team? How are you going to go after this customer? How are you going to solve this internal project? You should have a bigger picture in mind and how that rolls up to everything else. But if you're running around all day, meeting after meeting, you cannot do that. It's impossible. I know this guy, Warren Roosted, who's really, really an interesting guy. He's a bit older now, but he played in the NBA. He was, I think, right-hand man to Gerald Ford, which is an old U.S. president. And now he's on the board of like 30 different companies. Every day, he spends 4 hours strategically thinking. That means he turns off his phone, shuts the door to his office, and just thinks about about what these organizations need to do. Now, none of us here are on the board of 30 companies, I don't think, so we might not need 4 hours a day. But what you need to do is you need to start putting in time into your schedule just to think. And I'm going to give you a real hack how to do that. But if you're saying to yourself, I need to be more strategic, and you're not leaving any time in your schedule to think strategically, that's the reason. All right, so we have our 5 mindset shifts, and I always like to be practical, so I'm going to give you one hack for each shift. I'm a tech guy. We like our hacks. So the first thing is leading others starts with yourself. Really get to know who you are. Knowing how you show up as a leader is the key to your long-term leadership. So really get clear. And this is a lifetime journey. You're never going to be there. You're just going to get more insight to it. But think about, what are your values? What do you like doing and not like doing? Who do you interact best with? Where could you learn? Where could you use some help? And always position yourself in a place you're going to be successful. So really get to know yourself and then work on showing up as that person. Second, embrace your role as a leader. Right now, if you still think of yourself as an engineer, if you still think of yourself as a finance person, erase that. You are a leader. You're a leader who used to be an engineer. You're a leader who used to be a programmer. You're a leader who used to be whatever. Your career now is to lead. Don't read more books on engineering. Read books on leadership. Whether it's mine or somebody else, start hanging out with other leaders. If you don't have other leaders, hopefully at other companies or other divisions, because that's really where you get new perspectives, it's time to meet some new people, because that's really, you want to surround yourself by this type of thinking.
Michael, you have 5 minutes more.
5 minutes? Good. Right on time. Move from your ego to your authentic self. This is about shifting. If I ask you right now, when you're in your ego, what's the signs of when you're in your ego? When I'm in my ego, I can feel my body tense. I get defensive. Sometimes I feel like a buzzing back here. And for you, what does that feel like? Some people it's in the stomach, some people it's in the head, some people different things happen. And if you can start just catching yourself when you're in your ego, and just say, hey, I'm going to move it to my authentic self. That's life-changing. Just start showing up more and more in your authentic self. Embody alignment, integrity, and ownership. Where's one small place you can level up in each area? Maybe you don't have a vision for your team yet. Maybe it's developing that. Maybe it's telling them about it. The integrity, where are you not in integrity in your life? Where can you do that? What about ownership? Where can you take more ownership in your life? And then here's a really easy one. Create a power hour in your calendar. So a power hour is one time a week, possibly. Schedule the first hour of your day. Don't let anybody take this hour. And after you get up, before you look at your email, you want to take 1 hour. And the best thing to do is to take a walk outside for the first 20 minutes and in nature. I know it might be a little hard in Jakarta, but ideally you just get out of the house a little bit, get out of your normal thing, take a little bit of a walk, and just think. Just think. And maybe it's like, oh, I have this problem with this employee, and just say, hey, I just want to ruminate on that. Don't try to just solve it. Just let your brain play with it. Or maybe you just go out there and you just say, hey, anything that comes to my mind can come to my mind. You spend 20 minutes just doing nothing. And then you get back and you open up your laptop, turn on your computer. For the next 40 minutes, don't look at email. For the next 40 minutes, do something strategic. Maybe you got some insight from your walk. Maybe you reach out to some old colleagues you haven't talked to in 5 or 10 years to keep that connection alive. Maybe you make a proposal, maybe a plan for a new business line or whatever it is. If you start doing that once a week, after a couple weeks, after a couple months, you're going to find yourself moving ahead strategically. But you have to box out that time. It doesn't happen by accident. And by putting an hour in every week, that's a great, easy hack to really go and do that. So these are your 5 mindset shifts. And I just want to leave you with this. I told you about the program that I took, the psychology program I took. Its main thrust was compassion. Now, I don't know about you, but nobody will ever be as hard on me as I am on myself. I'm constantly focusing on the one thing I didn't do perfectly, or how I could have done this better, or how I could have done that better. I think that's part of being a leader. The funny thing is that's what drives us, and that's what can make us successful, but that can keep us into this downward spiral of negative self-talk. So look, leadership is hard. There's no flow chart for leadership. You're going to run into things every day that you never thought you'd run into. So give yourself a break. I just want to leave you with that. Have some compassion for yourself. You're going to get knocked around a little bit. And as PLN, as you're going through this massive transformation, I mean, you're moving from an electric company to an energy company to a technology company. That's a massive shift. In a country that has so much gifts, and your gift is to help enable that through what PLN is doing, which is so fun. That means you have to take risks. You have to move out of your comfort zone. And when you take risks, we need you to be a risk taker, that means you're going to fail. But when you fail, you need that compassion. That compassion is where that resilience comes from. So go easy on yourself. Look at all the amazing things that you do, and have compassion for your one peer that might be going through a tough time. Put your arm around them. Give them the compassion that they need. But above all, everybody, let's make sure we give it to ourselves. Thank you.